In 1967, a Muay Thai champion flew from Bangkok to Hong Kong carrying one mission: prove that Bruce Lee's speed was exaggerated folklore. He brought cameras. He brought witnesses. He brought a public challenge written in 3 languages. What he didn't bring was a plan for what happened when Lee agreed. The entire demonstration lasted less than 90 seconds. The champion left Hong Kong the same night. He never spoke publicly about what occurred in that room, but the 12 people who watched would retell it for the rest of their lives, not because of what Bruce Lee did, but because of what he didn't need to do. This is what happens when silence becomes the loudest answer. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday in March. It was cream-colored, formal, and bore 3 postal stamps from Bangkok. Inside were 2 pages written in English, with smaller annotations in Thai and Cantonese along the margins. The handwriting was precise. The tone was respectful. The intent was unmistakable. Bruce Lee's secretary placed it on his desk without ceremony. She had seen challenge letters before, dozens of them from across Asia and the United States. Most were theatrical. Some were barely coherent. A few came from legitimate martial artists testing reputation against reality. This one was different. The author identified himself as Chai Sarasut, 28 years old, Muay Thai record of 30, 2 wins, no losses, fighting weight 147 pounds. He taught at a Bangkok academy that trained military officers. His English was careful, almost academic. He did not insult Bruce Lee. He did not question his skill. He questioned his speed. Specifically, he questioned whether the 1-inch punch, the technique Lee had demonstrated at the 1964 Long Beach International Karate Championships, was the result of camera angles, cooperative partners, or physical editing. Sarasut had studied the footage. He had consulted with engineers and trainers. His conclusion, written in the 2nd paragraph, was clinical. I believe the effect is partially optical. He proposed a solution. He would fly to Hong Kong at his own expense. He would bring his own camera operator. He would volunteer as the test subject. If Bruce Lee could demonstrate the same speed and power under neutral conditions, Sarasut would issue a formal retraction and publish it in 3 Southeast Asian martial arts journals. If Lee declined, Sarasut would interpret the silence as confirmation. The letter ended with contact information for a hotel in Kowloon and available dates in April. Lee read it twice. His students expected him to discard it. In the 4 years since opening his Junfan Gung Fu Institute, Lee had ignored at least 50 challenges. Most were postured aggression. Others were poorly disguised attempts to build reputation by association. Lee had no interest in public spectacle. He had even less interest in proving himself to strangers. But this letter was not postured. It was methodical. It named a specific claim, proposed a specific test, and offered a specific consequence. The tone was not that of someone seeking fame. It was that of someone seeking confirmation. Lee placed the letter in his notebook. 2 days later, he sent a reply. The response was shorter than the original challenge. Lee confirmed the meeting. He provided an address, not a public venue, but his private training hall in Kowloon Tong. He specified a date, April 17th, 2:30 in the afternoon. He stipulated 3 conditions. First, the demonstration would be closed. No general audience. Sarasut could bring his cameraman and 1 translator. Lee would permit 10 additional witnesses of his choosing, students, colleagues, and 2 independent journalists who had covered martial arts in Hong Kong for over a decade. Second, there would be no sparring, no competitive match, no timed rounds. Lee would perform a controlled demonstration of speed and impact. Sarasut would judge whether the effect matched the claims. Third, the footage would remain private unless both parties agreed otherwise. Sarasut received the letter on April 3rd. He confirmed by telegram the same day. He booked his flight for April 16th. He told his students in Bangkok he would return within a week, possibly sooner. He packed his camera, his training notes, and a single formal jacket for the meeting. He did not pack for an extended stay. The training hall was smaller than Sarasut expected. He arrived 20 minutes early. The building sat on a quiet residential street in Kowloon Tong, unmarked except for a brass number plate beside the door. Inside, the space measured roughly 40 feet by 30. Hardwood floors, No walls, no mirrors, no banners, no photographs of past victories or lineage charts. The only decoration was a single calligraphy scroll near the entrance. Sarasute's translator told him it meant, "Research your own experience." By 2:15, all 12 witnesses had arrived. Lee had not chosen a crowd. He had chosen a jury. There were 2 senior students, Dan Inosanto and Ted Wong, both of whom stood near the back wall with notebooks. There were the 2 journalists Lee had mentioned, Michael Goodwin from the South China Morning Post and a freelance writer named Hu Wei, who documented martial arts across East Asia. Sarasute had brought his cameraman, a man named Somchai, and his translator, a Hong Kong native who worked at the Thai consulate. The remaining 5 witnesses were practitioners Lee had trained with or evaluated over the past 3 years. None of them were famous. All of them understood enough about body mechanics to recognize fabrication. The room had no seating. Everyone stood. At 2:30 exactly, Bruce Lee entered from a side door. He wore black cotton pants and a dark grey training shirt. No shoes, no jewelry. His hair was shorter than it appeared in photographs. He moved across the room without hurry, greeted Sarasute with a formal bow, and shook his hand. His grip was firm but brief. He acknowledged the cameraman and translator by name. Then he turned to the rest of the room. "This is not a challenge match," Lee said. His voice was level, almost conversational. Sarasute has asked a reasonable question about a specific technique. I've agreed to demonstrate that technique under observation. There will be no sparring, no competition, no winner. He gestured toward a section of open floor near the center of the room. I will perform 3 movements at full speed and full power. Mr. Sarasute will defend however he chooses. I will not make contact. If I fail to demonstrate control or speed, he will say so, and I will accept that assessment. Sarasute nodded. He had expected something more theatrical, a speech about philosophy, a lecture on tradition, perhaps even a refusal to perform unless the challenger apologized. Instead, Lee was treating this like a laboratory experiment. Lee walked to a wooden desk near the wall and retrieved a stopwatch. "The entire demonstration will last no longer than 90 seconds, he said. "Mr. Somchai, you can record whenever you're ready." The cameraman raised his equipment. The red light blinked on. Sarasute removed his jacket and handed it to his translator. He stepped into the center of the floor. His stance was textbook Muay Thai, weight balanced, hands high, elbows tucked. He had defended against faster opponents before. He had trained specifically for this moment, drilling speed reactions for 2 weeks in Bangkok. Lee stood 8 feet away, hands at his sides, posture relaxed. The room went silent. No one spoke. No one shifted weight. Even the sound of breathing seemed to flatten into the walls. Goodwin, the journalist, would later write that the silence was not anticipation. It was displacement. As if the room itself was holding position before something irreversible, Lee looked at the stopwatch. Then he looked at Sarasute. "Ready?" he asked. Sarasute nodded. Lee pressed the stopwatch and moved. The first strike came from a distance Sarasute had calculated as safe. Lee closed 8 feet in a motion that left no visible preparation. No shift in shoulder angle. No telegraphed step. One moment he was still. The next, his lead hand was 3 inches from Sarasute's face. Stopped so precisely that the Thai fighter felt the air displacement, but no contact. Sarasute had not moved. He had not blocked, not parried, not even flinched. His hands remained in guard position, but they had done nothing. His eyes registered the position of Lee's fist only after it had already stopped. Lee retracted and reset to his original stance. Somchai's camera captured the entire sequence. The footage would later be studied frame by frame. Even slowed down, the entry showed no wasted motion, no wend up, no chambering. The strike appeared complete in the same moment it appeared to begin. "1," Lee said quietly. Sarasute adjusted his stance. He widened his base, lowered his center of gravity, brought his guard tighter. This time he would track the shoulder. This time he would read the hip. He had fought boxers, kickboxers, karatekas. Speed was always readable if you knew the mechanics. Lee moved again. This time it wasn't a straight punch. It was a hook that came from an angle Sarasute's peripheral vision should have caught early. But there was no arc, no loop. The fist traveled in a line that defied the geometry of a hook, yet arrived with rotational force. It stopped 1 inch from Sarasute's temple. Again, no contact. Again, Sarasute had not reacted in time. His block came a half-second late, his forearm rising to cover a space Lee's hand had already vacated. The Thai fighter's breathing changed, not from exertion, from recalibration. What he was experiencing did not match his training. The speed wasn't the problem. The problem was the absence of preparation. There was nothing to read. Lee stepped back. "Two," he said. The room remained silent, but the quality of that silence had changed. The witnesses were no longer waiting for something to happen. They were processing what had already happened. Ted Wang's pen had stopped moving. Hu Wei, the freelance journalist, stood with his mouth slightly open, not in shock, but in the physical reaction of someone whose assumptions had just been edited. Sarasute reset again. This time he didn't adjust his stance. He watched Lee's eyes, his breath, the micro-tension in his feet. If the next movement was coming, it would start somewhere. Everything starts somewhere. Lee's third technique was not a punch. It was the 1-inch punch, the exact technique Sarasute had flown 800 kilometers to verify. Lee placed his fist 1 inch from Sarasute's sternum. He did not pull back. He did not chamber. His body was already in position. He stood there for 2 full seconds, giving Sarasute time to brace, time to root, time to prepare for impact. Then Lee's entire structure released. The force moved through Sarasute like a shockwave through water. His body traveled backward 4 feet before his legs remembered to compensate. He didn't fall. He didn't stumble, but he moved not from a push, not from a shove, but from something that bypassed his muscular defense entirely and spoke directly to mass. Lee had made contact this time, controlled, measured, unmistakable. Sarasute stood in his new position, breathing carefully. His chest felt warm, not painful, but undeniably affected. Lee checked the stopwatch. 41 seconds, he said. He clicked it off. Then he bowed. Lee walked to the wooden desk and set down the stopwatch. He did not ask if Sarasute needed a moment. He did not offer water or acknowledgement. He simply stood there waiting, as if the next part of the meeting was scheduled and they were both expected to continue. Sarasute looked at his translator, then at Somchai. The cameraman had lowered the equipment. The red light was off. No one in the room had moved toward the door. No one had spoken. The demonstration was over, but nothing felt concluded. Lee turned back toward Sarasute. "You use the rear knee when you close distance," Lee said. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. Sarasute blinked. "Yes, I've seen footage of Muay Thai fighters generating power from the clinch using knee rotation," Lee continued. "But the entry angle changes depending on the opponent's height. How do you adjust the trajectory against someone taller?" The question was specific, technical, not rhetorical. Sarasute hesitated, then answered. "You elevate the hip earlier, before the clinch locks. If you wait until after, you lose the angle." Lee nodded slowly. He walked to the center of the floor, the same place where moments earlier he had demonstrated 3 techniques Sarasute couldn't defend against. He gestured for the Thai fighter to join him. "Can you show me?" Lee asked. The room shifted. Dan Inosanto, standing near the back, would later tell students that this moment, not the demonstration, not the speed, not the 1-inch punch, was the moment he understood what separated Bruce Lee from other martial artists. It wasn't the ability to dominate. It was the refusal to stop at domination. Sarasute stepped forward, uncertain. His translator moved as if to explain something, but Sarasute waved him off. "You want me to demonstrate on you?" Sarasute asked. "Slowly," Lee said. "I want to see the mechanics." For the next 11 minutes, the man who had traveled from Bangkok to disprove Bruce Lee's speed taught Bruce Lee a Muay Thai technique. Sarasute explained the hip rotation, the timing of the elevation, the placement of the hands during the clinch to maintain balance while driving the knee upward. Lee asked questions. He requested that Sarasute repeat the motion from 3 different angles. He took notes on a small pad he retrieved from the desk. He practiced the entry twice, adjusting his posture based on Sarasute's corrections. When Lee executed the technique the 3rd time, Sarasute paused. "That's correct," he said quietly. Lee bowed. "Thank you." He turned to Somchai. "Did you record that exchange?" The cameraman shook his head. The camera had been off since the demonstration ended. "Good," Lee said. He looked at Sarasut. "What you just taught me is yours. I won't teach it without crediting the source." Sarasut said nothing. His expression had not changed, but something behind it had. The tension that had carried him from Bangkok to this room, the need to verify, the need to confirm or deny, it had dissolved. Not because he had been defeated, because he had been respected in a way that made defeat irrelevant. Lee walked back to the desk and retrieved a business card. He handed it to Sarasut. "If you're in Hong Kong again, I'd like to continue this conversation," Lee said. Sarasut accepted the card. He held it for a moment, then placed it carefully in his jacket pocket. He bowed. Lee returned the bow. The meeting was over. No one had won. No one needed to. Sarasut left the training hall at 4 o'clock. He did not speak to the journalists on his way out. He did not offer commentary to his translator. He collected his jacket, thanked Somchai for his work, and walked into the afternoon heat of Kowloon Tong without looking back. His original return flight was scheduled for April 22nd, 5 days away. He had booked a week in Hong Kong, anticipating follow-up meetings, possible media requests, perhaps even a second demonstration if the first proved inconclusive. He changed his ticket that evening. The last flight to Bangkok departed at 11:40. Sarasut confirmed a seat by 6 o'clock. He told his translator the matter was resolved, and there was no need to remain in the city. The translator asked if he wanted to draft a statement for the martial arts journals Sarasut had mentioned in his original letter. Sarasut said no. He returned to his hotel, packed his bag, and sat by the window overlooking Nathan Road. He did not write. He did not review Somchai's footage. He simply waited for the appropriate time to leave for the airport. At the terminal, a clerk asked if his trip had been successful. Sarasut answered, yes, and did not elaborate. He boarded without incident. The flight was half empty. He took a window seat near the rear and closed his eyes before takeoff. He did not sleep. He did not read. For 2 hours and 40 minutes, he sat in silence, reviewing nothing, preparing nothing. When he landed in Bangkok shortly after 2 in the morning, one of his students was waiting at arrivals. The student asked how the demonstration had gone, whether Lee had agreed to the test, whether the speed was legitimate. Sarasut told him they would discuss it later. He never did. In the weeks following his return, Sarasut taught his regular classes at the academy. He trained the military officers. He supervised sparring sessions. He did not mention Hong Kong. When students or colleagues asked about the trip, his response was consistent. It was a private meeting. There's nothing to report. He did not publish a retraction in the 3 journals. He also did not publish a confirmation. He published nothing. But the 12 witnesses had no such agreement. Within 3 weeks, Michael Goodwin wrote a short column for the South China Morning Post. He did not describe it as a fight. He described it as a technical examination in which one martial artist demonstrated principles that current training models may not adequately explain. He included no photographs. He did not mention Sarasut by name, referring to him only as a visiting Muay Thai specialist. Huwei's account was longer and more detailed. Published in a Hong Kong-based martial arts monthly, it included descriptions of all 3 techniques, the stopwatch, and the teaching exchange that followed. Hu did not draw conclusions. He presented the events in sequence and allowed the sequence to speak. By June, the story had traveled to Taiwan, Singapore, and Manila. By August, it appeared in 2 American martial arts magazines, both of which incorrectly reported it as a challenge match that Lee had won by knockout. Sarasut saw the American versions. He did not correct them. In September, a reporter from a Bangkok newspaper contacted Sarasut's academy, asking for an interview about the Bruce Lee incident. Sarasut declined. The reporter asked if the stories were exaggerated. Sarasut's only response, delivered through his secretary, was, "I have nothing to add to what others have written." He never spoke about April 17th again, not in interviews, not in seminars, not even in private. In 1978, 11 years after the demonstration, Huwei published a retrospective. By then, Bruce Lee had been dead for 5 years. The films had made him a global figure. The philosophy had been repackaged into best-selling books. The one-inch punch had been analyzed by physicists, replicated by imitators, and reduced to a signature move in popular imagination. Hu's article appeared in a now defunct Hong Kong quarterly called Martial Resonance. The piece was titled, "The Day Someone Proved That Dominance and Destruction Are Not the Same Thing." It was 4,000 words long. It did not describe Lee as a fighter. It described him as a problem solver who understood that the highest form of control is the kind that doesn't require enforcement. Hu included details he had not mentioned in his original 1967 coverage. He wrote about the silence in the room after the third technique. He wrote about the way Sarasute's posture changed, not collapsed, but recalibrated. He wrote about Lee asking for instruction, about the 11 minutes of teaching, about the careful way Lee took notes, as if he were the student and Sarasute the authority. The demonstration lasted 41 seconds, Hu wrote. But the lesson lasted longer than anyone in that room expected, because Lee did not stop when he had made his point. He continued until the point became mutual. The article circulated quietly. It was not sensational enough for mainstream press. It was too philosophical for sports coverage. But it reached the people it needed to reach: teachers, practitioners, students who understood that martial arts were not about winning, but about discovering what winning costs and whether the cost is worth paying. In 1981, a documentary filmmaker named Kenneth Lowe was researching a film about Muay Thai's expansion outside Thailand. He traveled to Bangkok and requested an interview with Chai Sarasute, who by then was running one of the most respected training academies in Southeast Asia. Sarasute agreed to the interview, but specified that certain topics were off-limits. Lowe asked anyway. Near the end of the conversation, after 2 hours of discussing technique, tradition, and the evolution of striking arts, Lowe mentioned Hong Kong. He mentioned 1967. He did not ask a direct question. He simply said the name Bruce Lee and waited. Sarasute was silent for nearly 20 seconds. Then he spoke. He didn't need to prove anything, Sarasute said. That was the proof. Lowe asked if he could elaborate. Sarasute shook his head. If you understand what I just said, no elaboration is necessary. If you don't, no elaboration will help. The interview ended shortly after. The exchange appeared in the final cut of Lowe's documentary, but without context. Viewers unfamiliar with the 1967 demonstration had no reference for what Sarasute meant. Those who knew the story understood immediately. Sarasute passed away in 2019 at the age of 81. His obituary in the Bangkok Post mentioned his military training work, his contributions to Muay Thai education, and his role in helping establish Thai martial arts programs in 12 countries. It did not mention Bruce Lee. It did not mention Hong Kong, but in the comments section of the online obituary, someone posted a question: "Is this the same Sarasute who went to Hong Kong in the 1960s? Someone else replied, yes. A third commenter added, "I never talked about it." But everyone who trained under him knew. He taught us that respect is what you do after you've already won. The thread continued for 3 days. No one argued. No one debated what happened in that room. They simply shared what they had been told by teachers who had been told by other teachers, in a chain of transmission that had nothing to do with footage or records or proof. The story had become what it was always meant to be. Not a fight, a standard.